How do we find peace after losing someone we loved? How do we find strength to carry a heavy heart weighed down by grief and by loss? Well, loss often feels like standing between two worlds. And often in that in-between space, we feel God may have abandoned us. What if in these in-between spaces, God hasn't abandoned us, but actually meets us in some of the most profound, life-changing ways? Well, I think the scriptures teaches us repeatedly how God meets people in places of change, transition, of grief, of loss. He enters in these sacred spaces, these in-between spaces, calls them forward with a renewed sense of meaning and purpose in life. He walks with them, he comforts them, and transforms them. Well, today we're going to look at the story in 2 Kings chapter 2 of Elijah and Elisha and the passing of the mantle. And in this short little story, we're going to learn 3 powerful things we can do to move forward with healing and peace as we grieve the loss of a loved one. First, we're going to learn the importance of facing the reality of loss. Second, we're going to learn how God meets us in our loss. And third, we're going to learn how God transforms us and gives us a new sense of purpose and meaning in life. But first, if you're going through one of these places of life, of loss and grief, and you need a little bit of support, put a comment below. Let us know what you're going through so we can pray for you. All right, let's get going. So the first step that we must take in healing from grief is accepting the loss. Accepting that we are going to need to make the crossover into a new way of being. Now, 2 Kings chapter 8, we read how Elijah and Elisha crossed the Jordan River. The Jordan River is a barrier between two worlds, much like grief is a barrier between two worlds. And as we cross that barrier, we enter sacred space. So let's read verse 8 quick and read about that crossing. So Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together and smote the waters, and they were divided hither and thither, so that the two went over on dry ground. Now, we may not actually stand on a bank of a river and have to cross dry land like Elijah or Elisha, but we will have to cross over, and that dry ground may be a death of a loved one, a divorce, maybe a diagnosis that limits our life. Maybe we lost a job. Whatever the loss is, whatever the transition is, the important part of healing through the pain that follows that transition is accepting that loss and putting the foot forward into our new reality. The second principle that we learn about healthy grieving from these verses is that God meets us in the in-between. So, verse 9, we read how Elijah and Elisha have crossed over. They continue to conversate with one another. And then we have this beautiful scene with the chariots of fire, the horses of fire, the whirlwind that takes Elijah into heaven. God meets us on the other side of our Jordan. God will meet us on the other side of divorce. God will meet us on the other side of the death of a loved one, the other side of the cancer diagnosis. He'll sit with us in those spaces. He'll encourage us. He'll transform us and promise that we will be transformed. Now, as we read in our verses here, Elijah doesn't just move forward chipper and everything's okay. He expresses emotion. Let's read again. Verse 12. Elijah saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more. He took hold of his own clothes and rent them in 2 pieces. So, God has met Elijah in the sacred space of loss as his spiritual father has been taken into heaven. And Elijah respects his emotions. He cries out. He tears his clothes as a sign of grief. Now, God doesn't waste this in-between space that he finds himself in. He's about to place a new mantle on him, give him a new sense of meaning and purpose in life, and then send him back out into the world. So the story doesn't end with Elijah crying. The story ends with Elijah serving. Now, many of us who've experienced loss have gained some kind of wisdom, some kind of profound shift in how we see reality. And often that shift in how we see reality, or that wisdom that we've gained, touches our heart in a profound way and calls us into serving and loving others. Now, God passes the mantle from Elijah to Elisha here, and we learn an important lesson about how to move forward after a profound loss. Well, Elijah goes into ministry. He serves other people. We'll read as we continue in 2 Kings about all of the miracles that God performs through Elijah. And we can take this to be an important point for us, that when we experience a loss, we can use that wisdom, that shift in perspective to love and serve others more profoundly. We learn this similar principle in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. Paul writes, "The God of all comfort, who comforteth us all in tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. For as the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also aboundeth by Christ." Now notice the really profound principle here. We're able to comfort those in trouble because we have experienced trouble. We are all wounded healers. Now, healing isn't about forgetting in these situations. Healing is faithfully carrying the mantle that's been placed upon us by God forward into the world to bring love, tenderness, kindness to those who need to hear it. So every one of us will eventually be called to our own bank of the Jordan. We will all be forced to stand in the in-between spaces of grief and loss. We will all carry a heavy heart. But like Elijah, we can take 3 faithful steps moving forward. First, we can accept the crossing. We can enter into the new reality that God has placed before us with faith. Secondly, we can trust that God will meet us in the in-between spaces of our life. That in that in-between space, He will provide comfort, He will provide solace, and He will invite us to be transformed. And third, we can carry the mantle that God has placed upon us. We can carry that heavy heart. We can carry that new, profound perspective given through grief, that wisdom that eventually will come, and we can use that to serve, to love, support, and minister to others. Now, the Apostle Paul reminds us that our pain is a source of the comfort that we can provide for others. Because we know grief, we can support others in their grief. Now that's a pattern that we see in Elijah's life. He takes his pain, the loss of his mentor, and uses that to go and serve others. Healing isn't about going back and finding who we were. Healing is about moving forward with faith and trusting that God will give us the strength to carry the mantle He's placed upon us. Now, if this message has felt encouraging to you, I'd encourage you to please subscribe. Please put a comment in the comments below about how we can pray for you. Please put a comment in below about what burdens you're carrying. And I hope that we together can support one another through this difficult season of life. Godspeed and stand firm daily.